and we're going to talk about how to use pop culture in the classroom to talk about environmental literacy. So first,
do you ever feel like you have this amazing lesson plan, but your students just don't seem engaged? Do you think to yourself, I tried so many strategies, what else can I do? Today we are immersed in pop culture, such as YouTube, infographics, cartoons, memes, GIFs, comics, and graphic novels. We are engaged in some form of pop culture media every day. Environmental literacy is understanding the natural world and our place in it, and equipping our students with the knowledge and habits of mind they need to shape their world and live sustainably. Using pop culture in the classroom can help engage students in environmental literacy. Welcome to DCC 2018 and this presentation of environmental literacy through pop culture.
How about that video?
so I use Powtoon to make that video, which you can also use things like VideoScribe. That way, like my kids sometimes, I don't know about your students, but they don't listen if you talk with them for a long time. So I like to use cartoons or make my own things so that they can be a little bit more engaged and I'm not standing up there just talking at them. But today we're gonna introduce ourselves. So I'm Efton Nance and I currently teach at a technical high school in Arvada. I teach forensic science. But one of my passions is conservation and biology. I've been teaching for 14 years, so I've taught various subjects, including biology. And so then, these guys.
My name is Matt Strackpine. Can you all hear me? And I am the art director for Denver Comic Con and Pop Culture Classroom. I teach comics, I make comics, self-published as well.
My name is Dave DeMalteris, and I have a fairly unique job in education. I work at a farm at Warren Technical High School, another campus from where Afton is from, and I also am adjunct faculty at Metro State University, and pretty much just farm and stewarding the earth. I'm also an avid comic collector.
So I'm going to first just start off talking about what environmental literacy is and the next generation science standards. So environmental literacy, it's how people are able to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of the environment and the circumstances that affect the environment, like air, climate, food, energy, water, and ecosystems. And so the next generation science standards dictate that this is what it takes to be an environmentally literate person. So you're able to make conscious decisions about how your actions affect the environment. You can problem solve and critically think. And so since our students are supposed to be able to know these things, it's really hard to engage them with just book learning, especially with this science. And so being able to have hands-on opportunities and active learning really helps with that. So in order to help kids make better connections with their world, we have to try to meet them where they're at. So a 21st century learner, we call them now digital natives. They're the ones that are always on their phones or on media or something. And so being able to connect with them is really, really important. And so providing different ways for them to have an outlet also for that is what we're going to talk about today. So here's just some examples of some ways that I engage my students. So, just any of these kinds of things in the classroom I put on the board. You can use them as discussion starters. And it takes very little planning on your part as an educator because you can just find something really quickly and just put it up on the board. And you can use that to start a lesson, you can use it to end the lesson, or just talk about what's going on with the unit that you're teaching. And so I just find even sometimes controversial subjects, maybe like climate change, you might want to use something that's a little bit more lighthearted to kind of break the ice if there's some tension or things like that. So then also there's some environmental literacy examples right now. These are graphic novels that I found to be pretty interesting for students. Picket Line, Climate Changed is a really great graphic novel. There's some cool artwork in there. And then I'm Not a Plastic Bag, it's just pictures, which was really impacting.
Switch right.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm the art director for Denver Comic-Con and Pop Culture Classroom. I'm also an instructor for Pop Culture Classroom. We use a curriculum to teach in schools, mostly aftercare programs. Also prisons like the Boulder County Jail and the Women's Correctional Facility in Denver. It's called Storytelling Through Comics. I want to start today, let me skip ahead. We're talking about pop culture. That's the name of our panel. But I'm going to talk about comics specifically. If you look at this Comic-Con as an example. There's room for celebrities, books, TV, video games, movies. Comics inspire that stuff more and more these days. They really do. It's beyond mainstream, right? So it's not possible, you know, it's harder to get a student, especially younger folks, to make movies or games. You can teach them board games for sure, but not necessarily video games. Now, a comic, on the other hand, is accessible. That's something that everyone can do. And just so you know, my favorite students are the ones that say they can't do it, because then I prove them wrong almost right away. Everyone can do this. And there's different degrees of comic book making, which I'll get into more specifically. So I want to talk about making comics and learning with comics, but I'll gear it toward the environment and environmental causes. And so comics in the classroom, how and why? I create comics for learning, like to use as a tool in the classroom. I also use comics in the classroom that I didn't have anything to do with, and I teach how to make comics. One of the things I found out right away was making comics and learning from comics is the same thing. It's hand in hand. And I recommend that if you're using comics in the classroom, you get your students to also make comics. And like I said, there's different degrees of that. I'll repeat myself a lot today. I'm going to touch on a lot of the same points over and over. Young people tend to feel overwhelmed when introduced to something new, especially something as artistic as comics, right? And so there's different ways to manage their, to manage their anxiety, so to speak, and to get them to focus appropriately. If you have a lesson plan, and let's say it's about the environment, that's a week long, think about integrating comics and making comics into that lesson plan for 1 or 2 days. If your overall lesson plan is 1 or 2 days, introduce comics as like an afternoon or a morning session. It's up to you. But figure that out ahead of time. And then that way you can always help gear students in the right direction, which is accomplishing the project and not getting burnout or overwhelmed or stressed. I've seen it all. I've seen all examples of that stuff. I've been doing this for going on 4 years now, and I've seen everything happen. I've seen the most confident student end up burning himself out because he went too big too soon. And I've seen the least confident student turn out some of the best, we'll call it amateur comics, that I've ever seen. Comics make subjects more relatable. If you can teach with comics, then you can make comics in order to teach. Does that make sense to everyone? You can teach your students how to communicate their ideas and express themselves all at the same time. It's truly valuable. So there's lots of ways to use comics in the classroom. Here, let me back up for a second. So I call it how and why, but it's really how is why. So whether you're using a comic that you created or a comic that somebody else created, the first thing I like to do is just let kids read comics, because you're just reading comics. And that takes a lot of the weight off right away. If I was a student, let's say in the 6th, 7th grade, and my teacher said, hey, we're just going to read comics for a few minutes today, I'd be over the moon, right? So while you're doing that, teach them about comics. We read top to bottom, left to right. There's panels, sequential, there's word balloons, there's captions. Just start getting them to talk about it. You can make your own glossary ahead of time if you want, a glossary of terms. and get students to identify different things. One of the main things I like to point out to students is that take a look at the credits page, usually on the inside front cover. There's more than one person working on the comic most of the time. I've made comics by myself, and that took a while, to write it and draw it and color it. I also make comics with a team, and we just churn those out. It's a lot easier to produce it. And again, taking the stress off, taking the anxiety off. You'll likely have students that want to work on their own. Great, that's fine. Then you'll have some students that bang out a 10-page comic in an hour. Fantastic. You'll have other kids that want to group up. One's the writer, one's the artist, one's doing the lettering, and so on. I like to share this, and I'll let you take a look at this later if you want to close. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 50. IDW publisher, they're upstairs. They put this book out. Super messy, right? It's got all the thumbnails in here. A lot of kids think that they have to sit down and draw perfect artwork right away. And as soon as you show them that even the pros who do something popular like the Turtles start out with thumbnails and keeping it super rough, that also takes the pressure off. I like this book because there's lots of notes in the margins where he criticizes himself as well. And he says, oh, I could have drawn that better. I'm not going to do this again. I should have done this last issue, that would have been better. And the script's in the back. These tools are out there, okay? Ask your local comic shop, and they'll either have them or track them down. But be specific and tell them what it is you want to use it for. How are we on time? Doing good? So coordinate the comics with your lesson plan, like I was saying. Find a way to integrate comics into the plan. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I also I would think about this too as a project-based learning tool. I know that a lot of education is moving that way, where you can, if you do have something that goes for a week, and talking about environmental literacy, you can turn it into a whole project the entire week. So, as you teach them things about environmental literacy, you could start them to write their script, and then, teach them, they can find, if they don't know how to draw. I have a lot of kids that tell me, I don't know how to draw very well. I'm not grading you on your creative ability. Maybe find some drawings on the internet, or, those kind of things. So I kind of help them with that piece, but then, then they can start putting that together as they go. So it turns into a giant project that they're working on, which to me also is less paper is great. So, that's
yeah, the key really is to have fun, and making comics is fun. And as long as they're grasping your overall lesson plan, then win-win, right? So, one thing I like to do is create this very simple chart. I call it problems of the world. You can call it whatever you want. You can draw this on a Post-it note, dry erase board. I've seen people draw it in a sandbox. You start out with small problems at the bottom, and you go up to big problems. It's another way of getting kids to manage their anxiety or focus better. Small problems are manageable things, like, oh, I lost my keys, right? Well, I'll find them. Those are super manageable. You can probably do it on your own. Big problems, it's going to require teamwork. There's a little more complexity. Again, teamwork. This is an ideal way for all of us to get through life, right? Not just making comics, but to solve some of these problems that we're going to identify. So get the students to call out the problems and start listing them. Now, composting is not a problem. A lack of composting is a problem. When I was a younger student, my family and my community, we were all integrating and adapting to recycling. Now it is composting. I live in Longmont, up north, and everyone's composting now, and it's super easy. Once you get the bin, you're off and running, right? Just make sure you put it out on the right day. And as they call them out, you start asking them, well, where do you think this would land, right? And for example, wildfires is the next, pollution, and then global warming, that's a big one, right? And so this chart turns into your story arc. It's the exact same thing. Now, I've seen different arrangements and different graphs for story arcs, but I like to keep it as simple as possible. So it's the exact same, look, it's just a diagonal line, right? You have your beginning, which is the introduction. That's where you introduce characters and whatnot. The middle is a conflict. Generally, if you have a hero, who's flawed in some way or has like a weakness, or you know, like Superman's weak to kryptonite. It makes the story a little more interesting, right? And then the resolution is at the end. You always want to end on a positive note, right? So, at this point, have the kids make a 1-page comic, 2-page comic, 20-page comic. It's up to you. You do whatever you like. What I like to do, especially at the outset, for introduction's sake, is to get them to go back to the list of problems and have them use one problem to create their very own supervillain, and have another one create their very own superhero. Whatever, so we'll step back so you can take another look. So let's say wildfire. Well, that's essentially the power of a supervillain. They're causing wildfires, right? And whoever the superhero is to that villain would essentially be the opposite, right? So have them identify that, give them names, let them draw them, identify their powers. Like I said, always build in a weakness so it's that much more interesting. Superman wouldn't be as fun if he didn't have kryptonite. And so, just for example, here I'll show you, here's one that I did. Now this is something I would show them as an example or something to shoot for, right? This is their point of reference. You have wildfire versus the extinguisher. Now I don't think this comic is going to sell, right? But it gets the point across. It makes the lesson fun and interesting, and at the same time they're learning more about the environment, right? So if you want them to all do their own, great. If you want them to do a specific one, by all means, you know, guide them in that direction. Do you have any questions at this point? So the big takeaway for me is, like I said, if you're teaching with comics, you can teach them to convey their own ideas by making comics. And I think as soon as a kid reads a comic, chances are he's going to want to know how that was made, right? So have him engaged. Have him or her make their own comics. And drive home the fact that what they're really doing is putting their message into the world. I make comics, I self-publish comics, and I don't put those out there and just go, all right, they're out there. The relationship between the creator and the comic is very different from the relationship or the experience from the comic to the reader. And so we make these things for people to read and to enjoy and have their own experience. And so what I like to do is, recommend that the students present their work. I've seen kids burst into tears at the idea of having to get up. So don't force them to do it. With their permission, show their work or have them explain. When I've been lucky, kids come in with their own comic fully ready to go, 22-page comic, and they tell us all about it, and that energizes everyone. So if you have even one kid with that sort of enthusiasm, go for it, okay? And you know, it's a simple idea, wildfire versus the extinguisher. But that's kind of the fun part, right? If you think they're ready for something a little bit more in depth, then get them. You know, find a way to, through your lesson plan, find a way for them to adapt the art or the writing to the various points that you're making. I'd like to have a little music going the whole time, really. That would be so nice.
We can't do that legally, unfortunately.
No, yeah, well, yeah, there's licensing stuff with using music in your presentation. But, so anyway, once students realize that they can convey their own ideas and be creative this way and express themselves this way, you got to keep encouraging them to do it. You know, if you didn't intend for comics to be a part of your lesson, and somebody said, can we make a comic? I would consider that, because now they're trying to get involved, right? Encourage them to do it on their own. And if they do make comics on their own, have them bring them in and share them, because this is going to get everyone else enthusiastic about it. If you can't find the right comic, make it. There's a lot of comics out there. But the reason why people make comics generally is because it didn't already exist. Does anyone in here make comics now? Any artists in the room? Hugo, I know you do. Hugo and I make a comic, or contribute to a comic called Colorful History, about the history of Colorado. This book's available at the merchandising booth upstairs. Pop Culture puts this out. I'm the art director, but I also contribute. They're just 2 to 4 page stories about different people, places, and events in Colorado.
There's a cool part about Cheeseman Park when it used to be a cemetery. So,
Did you guys know Cheeseman was a cemetery? Kind of still is.
kind of. There's still,
Yeah, they
there's
didn't
still
have
cemeteries.
success moving everything. And it's great. I mean, in the comic, there's a dog catching frisbee, and we show what's underneath. So, but these are age appropriate, and they're all accessible to kids. So, we've actually tackled some issues that you wouldn't think would be right for the comic, and we pulled it off. They are. So, one of my favorite quotes is by Art Spiegelman. You know him? He did a comic called Mouse. It's about the Holocaust, but all the characters are mice. He said that comics are the gateway drug to literacy. And it's true. Some years ago, there was a guy who cleaned up on Jeopardy because he had read a lot of Fantastic Four comics. I don't know if that's true. But I do know that in the 60s, when he was reading it, most comics were science-based. Superhero comics started out kind of magic-based, then they became science-based, and now it's anything goes. So there's a lot of value. And so I can't emphasize it enough. If you can't find the right comic, then have them make the comic or make it yourself. And the more amateur, the better, I say. If as teachers we aren't the best writers or artists, be upfront about it. Say, all right, I'm not a professional comic book maker, but I made one in order to break the ice with you guys, right? So they'll be less nervous about embarking on that on their own. Good. Any questions about that? We'll have room for questions at the end too. Okay, thanks.
Hi again, I'm Dave, and this is awesome. I'm relieving it. Just can't find the right comic, make it instead. Well, that's what I discovered and started looking into what I do, farming. And I mean, we deal with ages 8 to 88 on this farm, as you'll see. And how do you reach out to the folks, and how do you educate them? I had a tough time finding any comics about farming besides Plants vs. Zombies and some really old, outdated books. So I always joke around. I call myself the compost OG, and this is really, you know, Oscar the Grouch, the original OG right here, composting. Well, I helped build a farm, right? So we're like 5 years into it. We're really into like the largest stages of this farm. It's with the diversity of groups that come out to the farm at different ages. It kind of occurred to me after not being able to find comics, it's like, wow, this would be awesome. Like at our farmer's market, we can hand out comics because the kids know more about composting than the parents, but it would just be fantastic. So it's this dream I've had. I mean, I have a lot of issues. I'm a comic collector. So, I mean, I've sold them, trade them, all kinds of stuff. I'm not trying to like show a personal flaw or anything here. Like, I'm very proud of it. And, you know, when I came to my first Comic-Con like 5 years ago, I wasn't really here. I was outside waiting for TED Talks to start. And I hung out with all the people out there in their cosplay, and I was like, wow, wouldn't it be awesome if we called protests in our cosplays? I was like almost in tears just thinking about it. And you know, the theme at TED Talks is everything you need is at your feet, and that's something that's just stuck with me through this whole agriculture thing, because it's been amazing to see everything unfold and all the amazing support we get. So here's the students specifically from Warren Tech here, and Acres, our little logo. There's Henry in the upper left. He called me Crazy Dave, and I was like, dude, you know, that kind of hurts my feelings. He's like, no, Plants vs. Zombies. So, my inspiration. And you know, we teach just like hard, honest labor. Whether you're gonna go to college or you're gonna go straight into your industry, it's like, how do you pick up a rag and look busy when your boss comes? You know what I mean? And we work hard on the farm, for sure. It's really great. This is our farm dinner. This is totally staged, mafioso handshake right here. But it looks great, doesn't it? And then our JTS students, 18 to 21 years old, developmentally handicapped, they're getting into the job industry. They know they're Pokemon. When you go into their kitchen, There are Pokemon drawings everywhere. Some of these guys in here, like they're so into it, it's pretty cool. So from a pop culture aspect, our culinary department gets in there, and you can imagine, right, the curriculum for all these different programs. It gets pretty intense, right? They come out, help on the farm. It's a cute picture. I got thrown to the wolves, right? So I'm just farmhand. Now I actually work for the school, farm technician, so I'm still hands-on. I don't give grades, but I adjunct faculty at Metro State University, so I kind of understand. I feel like there's this really big correlation between curriculum and comic books, and I would love to say, oh, here's my comic book, take it with you. I've learned, talking about it, that's a huge process. It's your heart, it's your soul. It's like I say, an ounce of flesh on the farm. I need to stay a little late, give my pound of flesh or whatever. Curriculum is the same way. If you're a teacher, I'm sure you understand that. So here's some of the students seating my little farmers marketing panel, because I try to make it fun. I think fun is really important for sure.
It's gotta be fun. If it's not fun, don't.
Yeah, right? We're always having fun. And it's some tough work. I actually ran into a student who's in this picture earlier. We were hanging out. So here's our neighboring schools, McLean. We're pulling peppers. The teacher, Michelle, ate a pepper. So this is like a whole nother school that comes to our school to work on the farm. And then how do they know what we're doing? How do you know how to pick a pepper? Like, what's the adventures? What's going on? And so it's like in my mind, it's starting to formulate. I'm just kind of the call to action I should have cleared out as kind of the theme of my whole process here, right? Is like this needs to be here. Like, there are no comic books. If I had one and I could print it out, like an 8-page Tijuana Bible, I have access to a printer, I have a stapler, I could be like, here's your comic, and I really want to influence the students with more than just my banter. Plus, you're in a big field, so you can only talk to so many at a time. So keep us all on the same page. We all have food in common, basically. We have ages 8 to 88 on the farm, and maybe not 88 quite yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean, some younger than 8. The kids tell me now it's 8 to 108. My personal experience with the comics is they're my indoor refuge, after being outside all the time. Here's a couple commissions I've gotten. So this is I Grow Weeds Better, this Ninja Turtles one right here, just super awesome, BJ Hahn. And this is a young art student. She only charged me $5 for this. This one's gonna come up here in a minute, in a couple slides.
She charged you. So she's a commercial artist, how old?
Oh, in her 20s, and I told her that you need to charge way more for this. I honestly should have just given her more money, because it's great. And it was actually a group of 7th graders that pointed out to me when I had them. They were actually project-based learning from Earth Force, very environmentally focused group. And I was like, there are no farming comic books, guys, and blah, 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 talking. You can't even tell if they're paying attention. I'm used to the teenagers. I've gotten better at that. And the teacher came back to get some plants, and she was like, the kids all called you Crazy Dave. And I sent her home a bunch of plants and seeds from our greenhouse. I was like, awesome, So here's just kind of something I wanted to share from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 when they go back in time. And the Ninja Turtles are in the Edo period, Japan, so before industrialization. And look, they're like, look at this water. Hey, Leo, I don't see anything exactly. No tires, no beer, no cans. It's beautiful. And there's 2 versions of the comic, but in this version, it just splashes to this full page of the turtles just chilling. Awesome. And so the Ninja Turtles, like a lot of these comics have politics built in and all these things, right? But what I'm looking for is something a little bit, focused. I was thinking if I made my own bit, Crazy Steve, and just kind of borrow Plants vs. Zombies, and then you could explain some other relationships. So another environmental learning through comics, I figured this applies. Being a collector, I get beater comics. So I have these old boxes of comics, and then some of our kids are like, oh, we feel like slaves, we're making these jokes, and you don't want to make them feel like that's not a good thing. They're supposed to be having fun, they're supposed to be participating, or selling the food, and so I brought in some students, some beat up comics, and they snatched them up. So, I knew we were doing this talk. I reached out to the Colorado Comic Book Enthusiasts, which is a Facebook club that I'm a member of. One guy offered my buddy Josh five long boxes of independent comics. Boom, just like that. So these kids that come out to the farm from all different groups, or some of my MSU students bring their kids out to the farm, it's gonna be like, here, take some comics. You're not a slave, it's a little bit more personalized too. And I know not all of us have extra comic books, but I don't know, you can get my card after the show if you need some, because I'm gonna have way too many that I know what to do with. The response has been great. And it's all about community. Farming's about community and collaboration. as well as comic book collecting. A lot of my friends I've met through this group, a lot of just learning how to collect. How do you collect those sketches? How do you talk to an artist when you first meet him, you know, or her? And all these different things. There's etiquette, right? And there's cosplay. So it's rich, just like farming. So I see that relationship there. All right, so now smell-o-vision. This is my Victory Garden, 1943 World's Finest Comic, right? Victory Gardens, we're familiar with that concept, right? It's kind of like food scarcity, like we're told, oh, hey, you have to have a grocery store. We'll never grow our own food. It's still around today. I don't necessarily agree with it, obviously. So if anybody wants to smell this, come up here, enjoy the conviviality. Like when you go somewhere to a city.
Edition,
yeah, this is nice. It's really, really old. I'm about to get this slabbed and pressed, and no one's ever gonna smell it. It's Victory right here. Paper, it's 70 years old. This is what a comic book is to like someone like me who sits in their basement, like all hours, like bagging and boarding and organizing. It's like, how do I even read the things I wonder sometimes? I spend so much time putting them in my application on my phone. So I'm serious though, someone here, and like that'd be a great way to get into it. So this is just the cover. Victory Gardens, you know, this is like a little bit of propaganda in a way, right?
In my opinion, it's better than new car smell.
Yeah. Would you like to take a little smell?
Yes,
You can
I would.
tell us about the terroir.
I mean, it smells like 1943.
Yeah, it's a fine vintage. And it's a great metaphor for all these gardens that are popping up. 7,101 gardens from the USDA popped up in the United States. All these teachers are so busy. I've learned just from being kind of like thrown to the wolves. My boss was like, here's how to use Blackboard at MSU. I'm going on a sabbatical. And that's how I made my PowerPoints. And he's great. Don't get me wrong, but it was great to have that freedom. I have one student that this is my last semester, Karma Sherpa. He just moved here from Nepal. And when I showed actually the eBay picture of when I bought it with the price on it too. But he was like, Batman was around in 1943. It was really kind of cool. Like Karma would bring our class back down to the basics with his questions. And just using, I use a few different covers and comic book things as I teach my PowerPoint, so I can slip them in for sure. So we know like the benefits of nutrition and outdoor activity and how the farm can like bring all these things together. Like the way we're learning is smells, right? Like I don't do the work on the farm, the garden does. Like I don't make a lesson plan like, well, the English peas will be ready on June 17th, so we'll talk about them that day. I wait until I see them and they're about to pop, and I take one in my hand and it goes, and I've learned from some of the pros, that's what they do too. You know, I've asked these like really heady farm people, and that's what they tell me. You know, I'll just let the garden do the talking, and I expect some like awesome answer. So as far as like DC will always go back and cover, I feel like some of its old topics. There's this really cool comic book about Superman trying to solve world hunger. So despite his Kryptonian biology, he couldn't do it. Like he's Superman, he has to stop and help people and all these things. And he really took it to heart. You know, there's some quotes in here, the welfare of the earth and all of its people will always be my primary concern. But if there's a solution to the problem of hunger, it must be one that comes from a compassionate heart of man that extends outward towards his fellow man. There's an old saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. He asks everyone, well, I'll go on with the quote, but he asks everyone to follow his example. He understands he's a better example. He couldn't solve world hunger, like on the cover of that 1943 comic book. And there's a really great artist, Alex Ross, that does this comic. And so I just had to throw it in there because it's kind of a question. You know, world hunger, abundance, scarcity, and all these things. How can we teach with those? This is Gregory Baldridge, and I've been discussing how to make comics. And he makes these comics, he does sticky notes, and these are comics for teachers, by a teacher. He has some serious stuff in here too. It's like, it's a little cynical at times, but this is my life. And I'm sure if you're a teacher, this is your life too. And I'm not just saying because I'm outside working on the farm. A lot of times I'm just spitting hot air and telling people what to do.
It just makes me feel better when I bring it home and I can be like, I brought it home.
You bring it home? Yeah, so I'm not the only one. I didn't like understand some of these things at first, but you know, I'm going home and I fell asleep on the couch. And you know, Albuquerque has its own set of issues, right, that he kind of brings up in his essays and comments. Everything is unique, every school system, every place, right? Like my school's fairly affluent or whatever, right, that I work at, and not necessarily, I don't mean to say, I don't know, whatever. You know, every garden is unique, just like every school system is unique, and I feel like the comic books fill that niche. like, how do you grow a tomato in Colorado? Because they grow a lot different in North Carolina and some of these other places. What kind of bug problems do you have? These sorts of things. I had to include this photo in here. I can't tell you where it came from because of copyright rules, but it is another school system. And it's a sub-irrigated pot, Darth Vader's head. Really, really cool 3D printed pot. And Joseph Campbell, who they just, anyway, we need myths that will identify the individual, not with his local group, but with the planet, right? So Joe Campbell, JC, my boy, he saw, you know, this Earthrise phenomenon in 1968 when the astronauts took pictures of the Earth and the Moon, and that's kind of my definition of sustainability. It's like I joke around about the Venn diagram. It's a fantastic tool, but he's talking about like a whole Earth, like the whole Earth calendar, you know, and just that concept, right? So when you're teaching about the environment and about ecology, like eco means house, you know, this is your house, and it just breaks down into these different subsets. Of course, they're all interconnected, but I don't have the John Muir quote. There are some John Muir comic books that I'm buying. I'm very excited. So, you know, why does JC have some cred here in pop culture? Here he is being honored by Toy Boy George Lucas. Insert meme here. There are some memes, not of this specific, but he's looking at him like, where's my check? I feel that's the meme. So at Warren Tech, in the wintertime, people are like, what do you do farming? Well, this is an amazing opportunity. We have an amazing group of graphic design students, and I spent a really long time collecting a long box of comics and like doing a little comic book presentation for a couple hours. It was living the dream. And, you know, political comics, old comics. I have a comic that has Donald Trump building a wall that's 20 years old. I don't have the picture here because I don't want to go political. I'm very bipartisan. I'm a farmer. You know, I have to be. Pete and Scott, though, our graphic design teachers, really like made a lot of sense to me when they thanked me for coming down. They were like, you know, if you can just reach one student, you know, because I talked about that $5 commission and that art student and an artist salary, I also mentioned, which I probably shouldn't have, but if you can inspire one student, that's all it takes, and that's how it is on the farm and the garden too. We need all these future farmers. This is Ron Finley, the gangster gardener, plant stuff, print paper, very different environment. When I saw, and I smelled really bad in this photo, this dude is this is after the Slow Foods International event, harvesting and selling food for days. I was gnarly. And he like pretty much crushed Kimball Musk in a conversation about funding and things. You know, he's amazing. He curses, so check out the video if you get a chance. Ron Finley. And it did really make, you know, someone brought up the point, because I asked him, you want to make a comic? I sent him emails, he never replied, and my buddy was like, why would he make a comic with a white dude from Golden, a white kid from Golden? You know, he's in East LA. Like, more people are dying from the drive-thrus than by the drive-bys. It's like one of his quotes there, right? With nutrition. So he's fighting quite the battle. The Commissioner of Agriculture, another professor sent him to my classroom my first time teaching my greenhouse operations management class. And I mean, his vision of sustainability sometimes is a little different than the way I wax poetic about Joseph Campbell, by all means. But you know, he's just like a little kid. He returned all of our emails. We all emailed him and thanked him, and he gave us all advice on things. So this is Don Brown. This is like the man. And no way in any 5 years ago when I was at that TED Talks, I had no idea. I didn't even know I'd take a train. I didn't think I'd be meeting like political figures. You know, and he's like, we need to use all the tools in the shed. And I think that comic books are definitely one of those tools. There's definitely like funding out there. Slow Foods has some funding. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there, that I think it goes straight to the top, you know, from the bottom up as teachers. I mean, we've all protested here. I didn't get to protest that day. I had to work. It was a big day in the greenhouse. And I love protesting as a citizen.
There's been congressmen who have commissioned artists and writers to create comic books specifically to talk about climate change. It's like, okay, you're not listening to me, watch it happen, right? The juxtaposition of words and images is more valuable than ever when you're specifically trying to get a point across that somebody's not hearing.
The 411 series by Marvel is great about civil disobedience. So this is a really old one. It is a comic strip out of a newspaper. But Mark Trail, man, this is from the 50s, hard to find. And I found it in an old fishing scrapbook. Well, I learned about him that way. And this is about, if you've ever grown tomatoes, the horned tomato worm. And it'll eat half your tomato plant in a day. I go out there with students of all types, and sometimes they end up getting squished, you know, and it occurred to me right away, this is no way to honor life. You know, we can drown them. I've worked on a plan. You can actually take them and have them submerge themselves into a houseplant, and they become, so it's all about relationships, right? And my relationship with the butterfly moth or the sphinx moth, this little guy right here, some people call it the hummingbird moth, is like, I love this thing. And it's really the horned tomato worm. It's my worst enemy. Here it is kind of blending in with the tomato, taking some bites out of it. Here's the sphinx moth. This isn't my photo right here because it's really hard to get that photo. But it's really important to honor life. If you're teaching about the environment, if you're supporting the environment, if you're showing people, we're going to use resources to grow this food, and we're going to kill bugs. No way. So I think these are challenges. So as a teacher with a lot more experience than I, that's been working with nonprofit Sprout City Farms, specifically the Mountain Park Community Farm, and I approached her and I asked her, and she was into it. So she allowed me to show you some of her work. They work with some younger children, and they herd cats, kind of like I do, in a good way. I love cats. And you know, so they've got like 15 kids. So they got about 7 kids working on the farm, then they have to take breaks, right? And they have to drink water. And so they're doing these coloring pages that Jennifer Dennehy, 20 years Montessori professor, who basically left her job to farm. And now she's getting paid to farm for this nonprofit. And you know, her motivation too, I do have to like add it in here for sure, but she saw an article about kids that could name 10 name brands, but they couldn't name 10 vegetables. And I can attest to that. And it's ages 8 to 88. They've never seen whatever vegetable growing out of the ground. They're like, what's that? You know what I mean? And so this is some of her work. Compost, I believe, right here. And then they'll do some composting where she has like, you know, pollinators. And then they'll be planting for the pollinators, and they take ownership over that. So the way you sniff this comic book is just like a metaphor for the same way we teach on the garden. All the work is done by the smells and the taste. You're not allergic to this? Okay, cool. Try it out, you know. Here's her one about compost right here. And so I just want to end in the point that I just want to make a call to action. You know, if you write comic books, or if you know somebody, or if you're inspired to draw a stick figure comic book like Gregory Baldridge does, I bought 5 of those things, you know what I mean? There's lots of stories available on the farm. I love this picture of Fanny, our working Michigan's kid. She disappeared, but she was a lot happier when she got out of the jail. You know, sometimes we have friends on the farm that they're beneficial, but we might not understand them. So it's like, who's going to harvest the sorrel today? It's red vein sorrel, popular in Europe. Also, you know, at the farmer's market, the people that ate that little portion, I didn't tell them there were snakes mating on it. Wash your food when you take it home, even if it's organic. Earthworms, done to death. But man, I have worms, so many worms at work, and I just love worms. Resilience, hail, weather, things you can't control. Abundance, and of course, soil life. And then here's, I mean, I work on this farm, you know, but this is the guy who put it all together, chef, farmer, Josh from the Squeaky Bean. And here he is selling here. This is a pretty good abundant picture of our market with the tomatoes and carrots and the onions and everything looking great. You know, I mean, we talk about comics on the farm, Batman, whatever it is, just to get through our workday, because it's hot out. And like, you keep the conversations on track. Sometimes their conversations go off on things and you let them roll, but anyway, so this is important that we remind students. It is comic book related, because we're talking, I guess. And anyway, the power is yours. Right. Yeah.
That was a great idea. I just, seeing all these photos of the farm gave me an idea. Like I was saying, and I can't say it enough, making comics can be seriously overwhelming, right? Just like any new venture, especially for younger students. But look at these photos. Let's say you had a field trip out to the farm and you were talking about sustainability. You could use those photos later to make a comic, right? You don't have to draw them. You could use them as reference to draw from, or you could literally just put word balloons and captions right on those photos. So get creative and think about it that way. Another idea I had listening to this colorful presentation was that a farm would make the perfect board game, wouldn't it? So why not just, you know, you start at the beginning of the farm, you work your way around, and there's goals as you go, right? Maybe you plant something, maybe by the end it's grown. Think about it, right? Get creative when you do it. And the more you think about it, just like right now, these ideas will just come to you. So don't restrain yourself.
I put together a tiny URL, a website. There's some resources on there. the presentation from today is also on there, and then there's a Google form on the website. If you have any questions and you'd like to send those to us, we can get back to you as well, or if you want any of that information. So, yeah. Yes.
Any questions?
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
So I teach science classes, and in my classes, I spend a lot of time on nutrition. Well, I don't get paid to do that, but as a side note, since we're already talking about carbohydrates, proteins, and carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, I try to show them that this is in your foods. Sorry, I just stepped on something I just bought. That's probably not good. So I really like this, and we can't necessarily do field trips because that costs money and things like that. And I'm also not a comic book drawer, I'll be honest with you. So what would be ways can we possibly get help with the students? Like if I took them, let's say I gave them a assignment and they had to go to the website or go somewhere and kind of look at the food and then do their own, is there a way to walk them through that?
Yeah, so I usually try to help them. I usually have some websites already pulled up or references so that they can see something ahead of time, or exemplars, things that you can show them. Tell them it doesn't have to look exactly like that. Even I have kids that don't know how to draw at all, and so I let them either print pictures and then, like I was saying, put little goals on them. They don't have to be great at drawing, or it can be stick figures. Sometimes I just let them.
Yeah, there's a comic book called Bean World, and it's literally just the guy draws a bean with stick figure legs. And he's wildly successful. He's a living.
And exploring trying to make your own comic book and failure is really. Look at it, Rich. It's like you have the little spiral tails of the bacteria, and some bacteria, like roundworms, have those little things on them. So I feel like they can be pretty simple to present. As far as you can tell the difference between a bacteria by its tail, kind of make the characters.
So definitely starting with examples is great. And even just, I try not to give too many expectations or directions. I kind of give maybe 5 directions about the assignment itself and let them be creative so that they just feel like they can do whatever and it's okay to do whatever they're doing.
Oh, and it's always okay to mess up and make mistakes because that's the best way to learn and improve. I do this for a living, and I hate everything that I'm currently working on. And I know that it needs to be improved for the next time. So that sort of self-doubt can be turned into motivation pretty easily. You just have to explain it to me. And you should take a look at this book that I held up at the beginning for reference. These kinds of books are available where they take an existing comic. Something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is really popular with kids. And they show you the process. It starts out really ugly and rough, and there's notes in the margins about how even this guy who's, super wealthy from this, didn't like what he was doing all the time. And he would make notes to himself about how he could do it better. So the goal is really to finish the project, not make it perfect. And we tell ourselves it's finished, not perfect. We use that as a rule of thumb.
Did you know of any comic book applications for grown-ups?
So the video scribe that I mentioned, Powtoon, you can insert, I just chose those characters, so they kind of have it preloaded. You just have to make a script and then tape yourself with the script, and then you can insert those into that. But then Video Scribe is a hand kind of drawing on a whiteboard, and you can choose different ways that it can do that. You can draw characters, or it's just words. You can insert pictures, and it'll move the picture into it. It looks like a hand, too. It's really cool. So those are 2 great tools that I like to use.
There's comic book clip art out there. There's also programs. You can download free trials that go for a month or 2. And they're really easy to use. And they do a lot of the work for you. In fact, a lot of pros will use that stuff.
There's a comic book script archive. If you go, I think it's comic book script archive, or excuse me, comics experience, comics with an X experience.com. They actually have script templates there. When I was getting started writing, I actually use their template. You can modify it too. It's not like a screenwriting template where everything's really strict. They won't even read it if you don't follow all the formatting. But if you had kids that were into writing or wanted to write, the script format's really good. It explains how the panels work, how the dialogue and captions work, and everything. So yeah,
What was that again?
comics with an S. Let me see. One second. I pulled it up.
Yeah, and keep in mind that quote that I said from Art Spiegelman, comics are the gateway drug to literacy. Pop Culture Classroom really does embrace that. They have a curriculum for sale. I'm pretty sure it's like $25. It's pretty inexpensive. It's called Storytelling Through Comics. You can get it from their website. It's meant to be modular. You know, don't feel locked in. Take a look at it, use whatever you want, mix it up if you want to. That, and like, I was serious when I said, if it's not fun, just don't do it. Because I mean, there's no reason why learning shouldn't be completely enjoyable.
I think we're out of time, so we can hang around to other
Yeah.
questions.
Thanks for coming,
Thank you.
appreciate it.